Has it ever happened to you that you come across a comic that you know nothing about, but the cover is so striking that you can't help but buy it? Well, that's exactly what happened to me with Kill Your Darlings #1, a new series from Image Comics that debuted in September. I was simply hooked upon seeing the variant cover by Ryan Stegman, an artist who, in my opinion, has greatly improved his drawings since working on the original Superior Spider-Man run. Image Comics is the largest independent publisher of all, and it usually bets on new stories and themes that simply would not fit in Marvel or DC Comics. Over the years, Image has brought us great stories like The Walking Dead, Deadly Class, Happy, Ice Cream Man, Invincible and Spawn, to name a few, which is something worth mentioning since most people consider the comics as a medium focused solely on superheroes. Kill Your Darlings is a story that breaks with that concept and closes a gap between horror and fantasy with the vividness and naturalness that could only come from a child's imagination. This comic is the first work of writers Ethan S. Parker and Griffin Sheridan, along with Bob Quinn, who you may remember from Knights of Number. It makes you want to read the next one to find out how the story will continue. Kill Your Darlings #1 begins with a flashback to 1692 where we see a very common scene at that time. A father burning his own daughter because she has been identified as a witch. Although the reason why the writers show us this has not yet been explained to us, it is evident that it will be important for the plot in the future. The story progresses to 1995 where we meet Rose, a bright and very imaginative 8-year-old girl, who spends her time in a fantasy land of her own creation. Rose's mother, Andrea, loves her daughter, but Rose often leaves her to her own devices while she tries to make ends meet. Everything seems normal in reality in the imaginary world of Rosewood until an ancient and mysterious evil threatens both. Something I really enjoyed about this story is the setting created by Parker and Sheridan's excellent narrative, along with Quinn's expressive drawings and John Hill's colors. They simply managed to develop Rose's world in such a colorful and imaginative way that at one point you completely forget that you are reading a horror comic, and when the darker aspect of the story manifests itself, it manages to have a greater impact on you. Throughout the first issue we see Rose jump from her fantasy world to the real world. The deliberate contrast of fantasy elements with their reality counterparts is well executed and exceptionally charming. It really makes you think you're seeing the world of Rosewood from a child's perspective. Quinn's drawings are impeccable in Kill Your Darlings #1. It's an incredible piece of work that strictly controls the tone and setting of the comic. Quinn draws clear visual demarcations between the technicolor fantasy world and the stark tones of reality. The monotony of the real world is deeply captured thanks to the sequences of brown and gray colors used in the story. On the other hand, Rose's imaginary world presents a more cheerful and pleasant colorimetry that, when mixed with moments of tension, generates a very enjoyable parallelism. Often, parents who have problems tend to let their children live in their fantasy worlds to prevent them from seeing the harshness of their reality. What many parents tend to forget is that children are capable of seeing that reality without help and, by not receiving due attention, they transfer that harshness to their imaginary world in a way that adults do not usually perceive but that, to their own eyes, it's scarier than any horror movie. Kill Your Darlings represents this perfectly, because, although Andrea tries to avoid worrying her daughter, Rose is aware of how bad her situation is, and although she does not understand it as such, her mother's worry and constant distancing cause problems for her. Emotions, which are reflected in their imaginary world. Although it is evident that something much darker is causing Rose's nightmares, the allegory of children's emotional problems that the creative team manages to represent seems extremely striking to me because it reflects a reality that we often do not understand. The characters are magnificently expressive, from the imaginary inhabitants of Rose's army to the people of the real world. Everything seems vividly illustrated and packed with personality and intention. The deliberate contrast of the fantasy elements with their reality counterparts is well executed and simply phenomenal. The dialogue and narration are all naturalistic and compelling, especially from Rose. The protagonist never comes across as irritating or artificial. In fact, it is extremely realistic, something that is difficult to achieve in a single issue. Kill Your Darlings #1 is also surprisingly funny in a lighthearted, often tongue-in-cheek way that balances wit and seriousness. The conclusion of the first issue is a complete blow after all the wonderful exposition, perfectly structured to deliver maximum emotional devastation. All of this paves the way for the next issue to be a radical and exciting change from this one. Kill Your Darlings is a reinvention of Alice in Wonderland, with a darker theme that shows us how our protagonist's internal conflicts alter her fantasy world. It is an experience similar to the American McGee's Alice and Alice Madness Returns video games, but with a more current plot focused on reality. Although the story seems like it will have certain touches of magic and mystery, it seems like it will be an excellent representation of the life of a girl who, due to terrible circumstances, is forced to mature and grow, but soon discovers that leaving behind her child kingdom was not such a good idea, because this world will begin to look for her to take her back. Again, being a similar plot to the aforementioned video games. As of the time this video was uploaded, only the first 2 issues of Kill Your Darlings have been released, but the 3rd issue will arrive on December 6th, so it's an excellent time to start reading this series. If you have already read this comic, tell us what you thought and if you are excited for what this story can bring us in the future. We are the Comic Awakens and see you in the next review.